Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a review of really a marvelous box of a series that I don't quite know what's happening to it. Here it is. It's Nielsen, the Masterworks Volume 1, Orchestral Music. Now, I'm not criticizing this because this is pretty splendid. But, one of the things that kind of surprises me about Nielsen is that there is no complete edition of his music, no recorded complete edition like Bis did for Sibelius, for example, and or even of the degree that Finnish labels and people have done Sibelius and other Finnish music. I mean, the Danes are kind of reticent. Now, DaCapo, which is what this is on, does fabulous work by Danish composers, especially really contemporary Danish composers who we don't really know that well. And they have done like a fabulous series of stuff by Knudai Rieseier, for example. Other people we haven't heard of who are just marvelous, who deserve to be more well known. But Nielsen is Denmark's national composer. He really is. And he is the only Danish composer that everybody regards as great as Sibelius. If you have to pick one, for each country, you pick Nielsen for Denmark. Now, I happen to have been to Denmark a few times, and I know that this kind of annoys some people in Denmark because they feel, well, there are many other composers, and some of them are fabulous, and why should we only focus on Nielsen? That actually strikes me as a healthy attitude. It's the attitude of a place that has a somewhat thriving contemporary music scene. Just as, for example, 200 years ago, there was no classical music, or 300 years ago, because there was only contemporary music. There was what composers wrote for their aristocratic patrons, and the older stuff just didn't get played. We didn't hear Handel operas for 200 years. They just weren't performed. You listen to the more recent stuff, and the composers who wrote the more recent stuff. The difference, of course, is that back then, the composers who wrote the more recent stuff did their best to please their aristocratic patrons. Whereas now, people who write more recent stuff really don't give a damn what anybody thinks about it as long as they get paid and supported and subsidized. It's a fairly different attitude. But the overall concept in general is quite similar. I don't see any reason why DaCapo, are you listening, DaCapo, has not done a complete Nielsen edition. They have the material. They could organize it. It could be beautiful. And this is evidence of just how beautiful it can be. I mean, since they've done this, they've done a whole other Nielsen symphony cycle with the New York Phil under Alan Gilbert. This particular box contains 4, what you might call normal CDs, and 2 DVDs. The 4 normal CDs is the Michael Schonwandt Nielsen cycle, with the let's see, wait a minute, with the Danish National Symphony Orchestra, and it is first rate. It's as good as anything out there. It really is. It's excellent. I happen to review it. That review is sort of quoted here on the back of the box. Classics Today says, perfectly played, brilliantly conducted, and superbly recorded. Well, there you go. I mean, this was before cycles came out by Sakari Oromo on Bis, and the new one that they did in New York, which are, you could argue, maybe a little bit better in some respects, but essentially they do themselves terribly proud. And in addition to getting the 6 normal Nielsen symphonies, and there isn't a weak performance in the bunch. There really isn't. They may not be your favorites for each symphony, but it is an absolutely first-class Nielsen cycle, start to finish. The only other thing, the other thing that you get is the same Nielsen cycle, well, not exactly the same performances, but a Nielsen cycle under Schonwandt on DVD that you can watch live. Now, I'm not a visual person when it comes to this stuff, and I don't care about that particularly. The performances are entirely congruent with the recorded ones. They're just fine. So I have no issue with it. It's a nice bonus. It really is. The 4th disc, and I have to take it out here, is conducted by Thomas Dausgaard, and it is equally splendid. It is absolutely fabulous. And wait a minute. It doesn't say what's on the disc, so it means I have to get the booklet. Here we go. The booklet says, here's the booklet. It's Nielsen's shorter orchestral works, and it's just a wonderful collection of stuff because Nielsen wrote wonderful short orchestral works. There are a lot of them. There are more than you think. So this disc contains, here we go, the Masquerade, the opera, the overture, and Cockerel's Dance. And then Sir Olaf He Rides, which is something incidental music with a prelude that Nielsen wrote for that. And then Snefrid, Suite for Orchestra, which is more incidental music, some early stuff. And then Saul and David, the prelude to Act 2. And the Rhapsody Overture, an imaginary journey to the Faroe Islands. And Villemot's prelude to Act 3. These are all from his incidental scores. And then Pan and Syrinx, marvelous, marvelous tone poem. Pastoral Scene for Orchestra, which is masterpiece, incredibly evocative masterpiece. And then Cupid and the Poet Overture, and the Helios Overture. And just about the only thing missing here is Sagadrom, which would really be nice to have here, but it isn't. So that means there's quite a bit of Nielsen's music, including the concertos and other things that, by all, by any sort of, theory, should be also in an edition. They have done a second volume, which consists of chamber music, and I will be talking about that. And so if I haven't already, if it's the year 27,381. But the point is, they should just suck it up and do everything. They really, really need to do everything. It's important. He's a major, major guy. And one of the ways that Danish music, and of course Nielsen's music, is going to remain in the public eye is if you do a splashy, complete edition of your national composer. It's a great way to get attention for the cause, not just of Nielsen himself, but for Danish music more generally. And so I would urge DaCapo to consider doing that very, very systematically. I mean, while they still can, and while, this CDs still exist and that kind of stuff is still out there, because it really ought to happen. In the meantime, there is this perfectly first-class Volume 1, The Masterworks, and I recommend it very strongly. They are beautiful, beautiful performances. There is absolutely nothing that is lacking, frankly. Nothing at all. Great set. Absolutely great set. Great composer. I only wish we had more. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.